Good evening, folks. I want to tell you that I first told this story to Michael Roosevelt, who was a grandson of Eleanor and Franklin's, and I met him at Berkeley, where I lived for 50 years, at some kind of a social event that was raising money for some worthy cause. And I said to Michael Roosevelt, I said, "Do you like to hear Grammy stories?" And he said, "Oh, yes, yes, if you have a Grammy story, tell me about it." So this is a story that I told him. As I said, I went to the ethical culture schools in New York, and our school was over at the end of May, and the public schools went on for 2 or 3 weeks in June. And so one of the things that a lot of us did is we volunteered to do work to make life a little better for the people who didn't have all the kind of money that we had. And the job that I got was, there was a Camp Felicia up the Hudson River, just about 5 or 6 miles from Hyde Park, where the Roosevelts lived. And I volunteered to get that camp ready for the students, the children that they brought up from Hell's Kitchen, which was one of the worst slums in New York City. And when I got to the camp, the job that they gave me was that I was given a bucket of paint and a paintbrush, and I was told to whitewash all of the bathrooms. And they gave me a pair of, what do you call it, overalls that were about 6 sizes too big for me. And they tied a towel around my head to keep the paint out of my hair. And I was in the bathroom, swishing up and down this paintbrush, when the director of the camp walked in, and she said, "Mrs. Roosevelt, I want you to meet one of our volunteers, Rosalind Singer." And I almost died of embarrassment. I mean, here I was, 15 years old, and here is the wife of the President of the United States, and here am I with a big towel tied around my head, and a pair of painter's overalls that are 4 or 6 sizes too big for me. And so Mrs. Roosevelt stuck her hand out like this and said, "Hello, Rosalind, I really want to thank you for the work that you're doing. That's just marvelous, wonderful, wonderful." And I was just so embarrassed, I don't even think I answered her. And then about a year and a half later, the rector of the Ethical Culture Society died, and I went to the memorial service for him. And I was all dressed up in my patent leather pumps and my silk stockings and a coat with a velvet collar and a little velvet hat, and oh my, I looked elegant and fancy. And in walked Eleanor Roosevelt, and she put out her hand and said, "Oh, hello, Rosalind, how nice to see you again." When I told this story to Michael Roosevelt, who was her grandson, he said something very profound that showed how well he knew his grandmother. He said, "She remembered you for what you were doing, not for what you were wearing." So that's my meeting with Eleanor Roosevelt.